Good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone that's joining us here today. We'll get started with the event here. So just before we get going with the SEG virtual courses, there's two options for accessing your course audio here. You can listen to the broadcast through your computer speakers or your headphones, or call into the conference line. So you find your Zoom number through the Zoom conference list and use the webinar ID that's shown on the screen here on the right-hand side. As always, a quick reminder to all participants that this course will be in listen-only mode for participants. We highly encourage you to ask a lot of questions during our Q&A session at the end of the panel discussion. For those of you that are new to Zoom, you can do this by using the Q&A button in the control bar. It should appear either at the top of your screen or the bottom of your screen, depending on your setup. Another reminder that today's webinar is being recorded, and this recording will be available on the SEG's website within a few days. So I'd like to welcome everybody this morning to the webinar being hosted by the Early Career Professional Committee. Today's webinar is going to cover the benefits of being a professional geologist in economic geology and talk a little bit about some of the differences between the professional geologist, the competent person, and qualified person. As mentioned, this event's being hosted by the Early Career Professional Committee, and we have a globally diverse panel that's going to be joining us today. To get us started here today, what I'd like to do is put a poll out just to get us some information on where people are tuning into the event. So what you'll see here, once the questions start coming in, we have a couple questions that we'd like you to please take some time to answer. The first being which region of the world you're tuning in from. The second being whether or not you'd be interested in more regional specific events on professional registration. For example, a South American representative's focused on South American countries rather than a more broad focus that we're discussing today. The third question, what industry you are currently in. You can see the options that we have there for academia, government, mining, exploration, and students tuning in. And the final question, how confident you feel about the professional registration process and the understanding of the different types of memberships that are available to you in your region. So just take a few minutes here to allow everybody to get their answers in on the poll, and then we'll continue. So just to give everybody a little bit of information on what we're going to be discussing today, the ECP's put together a couple questions that we're going to engage our panelists on. The first question that we're going to talk about are the different types of professional registration. And we'll introduce the panelists in a minute here, but we have panelists from around the globe. We're going to discuss the types of professional registration available in their specific regions and regions that they've worked at in the past. The second part of the panel will shift to more of the qualified person or competent person versus a professional geoscientist, what the differences are, what the benefits are, and how it impacts registration. And then the third piece of the panel will focus on the benefits of having the title of a professional geoscientist and why it's important for early career professionals to understand the different memberships in their region and how to go about getting registered. Finally, we'll finish up the panel today with a Q&A session to cover any questions that may come up. As mentioned previously, there is a Q&A box either located at the top or the bottom of your screen, so please feel free to input your questions there. Panelists that participants that are also taking part can read other questions that have been submitted and can vote them up if they have a similar question or something related to that question to move priority questions to the top of the list. Okay, so the poll questions have just shown up. So it looks like we have about 50% of our participants today from North America, 26% from Europe, 15% from South America, and the remainder from Australasia, Africa, and Asia. Obviously, there's a very strong region-specific event desire here. So that's something that's really important for us to be able to understand that region-specific events will help ECPs with their registration. So we will take that into consideration. About half of the group joining us today from exploration, so 25% from mining, the remainder from government, academia, and students. And it seems like the group is generally in the mid-range on their understanding about professional registration process. So hopefully this panel today will give you some additional information on registering in your region. So to get moving, myself, my name is Nathan Bridge. I am the VP of Exploration for CanAlaska Uranium. I am a professional geoscientist and a qualified person for the company that I work for. I have been a member of the SEG for about 14 years, and I'm currently a member of the Early Career Professionals Committee. My role with the committee is handling the newsletter that are published in SEG Discovery. So for our panelists today, we have 4 panelists joining us from various locations around the world. I'm going to just take some time here to allow them to briefly introduce themselves, give a little bit of background information on where they're registered, where they work, and their understanding of the different types of memberships. So I'll start here on the left here. So we have Lucy Hollis from Teck joining us. Lucy is our America's representative for today. Lucy, if you could just please take some time to introduce yourself and give us a bit of background.
Thanks, Nathan, and thanks for the opportunity to join today. My name's Lucy Hollis. I'm a senior geologist with Teck Resources Limited, with whom I've been for the past 11 years. I'm currently on assignment to the Strategic Planning Group at Teck Highland Valley Copper Mine, which is located near Kamloops in British Columbia, Canada. And I've been here for the past 5 years, where I've been focused on creating, sustaining, and enhancing value through the embedding of geoscience and geometallurgy across the site. And the work is really centered on understanding the asset through the characterization of rock mass and applied ore body knowledge. Previous experience covers in-mine, near-mine, and greenfields target generation to development, mostly within the porphyry environment, and then lesser so within stratiform-hosted lead-zinc environments. I hold a MSc in Geological Science from the University of British Columbia within the MDRU research unit there, as well as an MSci in Geology from the University of Birmingham. And I recently gained professional geoscientist accreditation with EGBC in British Columbia earlier this year.
Perfect. Thanks, Lucy. So our second panelist that will be joining us today is Edson Ribeiro with Vale. Edson is going to be our South American representative for today. Edson, could you please take some time here to introduce yourself and give us some background?
Thank you, Nathan. So Edson Ribeiro, I'm a Brazilian geologist. 34 years of career. My expertise in resource evaluation, geostatistics. I joined Vale 27 years ago, and at the moment I am the head of global exploration, exploring for iron ore and base metals in different countries and different ore types. I'm also the deputy chairperson of CRISCO, the International Committee for the reporting standards of exploration results, mineral resource, and mineral reserves. And I will tell you something more about, the qualified person or qualified professionals. Thank you.
Thanks, Edson. So our third panelist that's joining us today is Mike Ventner. Mike will be our South African representative today. Mike, could you please take a few minutes to introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you, Nathan. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone out there. Yep, I've had about 27 years experience, both in the exploration and in the mining industries. I'm graduated from the University of Cape Town in 1993, and I've had a pretty broad commodity experience, mainly throughout sub-Saharan Africa, mainly grassroots exploration programs, and also right through to drill out and pre-feas type work. But in the last 10 years, I've been pretty focused on the critical metals, or that include what people call now the battery metals. So a lot of work in graphite and lithium and tantalum, niobium, rare earths, as well as uranium. And I became a professional geologist registered with the South African Council in 2004. A lot of my work is essential to being a registered professional, and certainly as a competent person for a certain suite of commodities. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. And so our last panelist joining us today is Zack van Coller. Zack's with Ariana Resources, and Zack is going to be our European representative for today. Zack, could you please take a few minutes to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone out there. So yeah, thanks for the invite out here. It's nice to join you guys. So yeah, I'm Zack. I am a special projects geologist for a small junior company in London called Ariana Resources. So my primary role within the company is to do resource estimation, project review, increase the value of the project portfolios that we have. I'm a registered member or fellow of the London Geological Society. I've been so for the last 5 years. I have about 10 years of industry experience, and I primarily report under the JORC Code 2012 edition. I'm also responsible for covering a lot of the exploration for Turkey, and we are one of the first companies that have reported resources in Turkey under the new UMREK code out there. So I have helped the team under there to sort of develop the resources for that code. I also cover a lot of the exploration in Australia for the company, looking at things like lithium, nickel, and also mainly gold. So my primary background is in low sulfidation epithermal and high sulfidation and porphyries, but I also work in VMS in Cyprus. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Zack. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn this over to each of the panels that are joining us today. We're going to have a discussion about the different types of membership that are available in the regions that they work in. So the first person I'd like to discuss with is Lucy. Lucy is our Americas representative. Can you please just give us some information on the types of professional registrations that are available in your district?
Certainly, Nathan. Yeah, and I'll focus here, speaking from the viewpoint of a professional geoscientist, which means that I am registered with a self-governing body or organization, and in this case, it's Engineers and Geoscientists BC, so EGBC. And for those that don't know, kind of the EGBC process for context, you know, to apply for a registration, you must meet kind of 5 core requirements. The first one being academic. So you need to have a 4-year full-time BSc program in either applied science, engineering, geoscience, science, or technology. And then there's an experience requirement as well. So 4 years of satisfactory work experience, which includes Canadian environment competencies as well. And those competencies in terms of experience cover technical aspects, so things like codes, standards, and safety. Communication competencies, so oral, written, reading, comprehension. Professional accountability, so being able to act with integrity in an ethical manner, and of course within the professional standards of the body. The last one in terms of competencies is the social, economic, and environmental and sustainability piece. So basically our relationship as geoscientists and engineers with the public. In addition to the academic and experience requirements, there's also a law and ethics requirement. So that requires us to be able to apply and then write a professional practice examination, for which, you know, there is some study involved. and then being able to complete a professional engineering and geoscience practice seminar as well, which is now online. Another requirement is language, and this of course is evaluated through several different methods, but a written essay, which forms part of that professional practice examination, and then on comments of referees and perhaps interviewers. And the last requirement of the 5 is that of good character, and that's evaluated through the comments of referees in the application process. I think in terms of the EGBC process, for me, I think being able to do it early in a career, which is, why we're having this webinar today for the early career professionals, is encouraged. In my experience, I kind of left it later in my career, and as a UK, somebody who had studied in the UK to start, coming into Canada and trying to apply for a professional geoscientist was a little bit more complex. I think those that are coming out of university, I'd recommend that they get on this early in their careers and make sure that they're taking the right courses to satisfy those education requirements and courses that are needed.
That's good. Yeah. So just if you could just briefly touch this, myself with experience in Canada too, on the differences between how Canada is governed as a body at the provincial level versus at the federal level, because it's not a countrywide process, correct?
That's correct. So each province has its own governing body. So each of the provinces will have an EGBC equivalent, and those are all managed by the province in terms of, and that's kind of who governs each professional geoscientist in terms of the Professional Governance Act, which is now in place.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Mike here. Mike, could you just give us a bit of information on the different types of professional registration that are in South Africa?
Well, in South Africa, it's governed by a single body, and that's the South African Council for Natural and Scientific. Let me repeat that. It's a mouthful. South African Council for Natural and Scientific Professions, SACNASP. So it also goes through it's based on an experience base and a qualifications base. So and I think if you want to practice as a geologist in South Africa, I think it's by law that you need to register with SACNAS. So they have various sort of qualifications. I would say you have a candidate professional, and then of course the full professional. So you go through a process of applying, and based on your experience, and you can be awarded then your PR SINAT, as you call it. And SACNAS is a registered overseas professional organization as recognized by CRISCO. And I think maybe Edson can probably comment a bit about that. Just personally, I obtained my registration in 2004, and this was about 10 years after I had graduated. And I thought after spending 10 years post-graduation that I'd generated enough experience to register as a professional. And of course, then going forward, everyone can assume that you can therefore a competent person. But that's not necessarily the case. You need to have that additional level of specific experience in the commodity or the style of deposit that you're looking at. But I suppose we can talk about that a bit later. But yeah, certainly, I would certainly endorse any geologist out there who's out there in the minerals exploration field to get that experience, whatever the requirements in your jurisdiction, and get that registration so you can it's something that prospective employers certainly will look at as sort of a quality assurance in seeing that a potential candidate's got relevant experience and education to back it.
Edson, if you just have a few minutes, if you want to add from the South American perspective, if there's any significant differences from those that Mike and Lucy had described.
Yes, the Brazilian case is quite different from the Canadian legislation. In Brazil, when you finish university, you have to register in this regional council to be a professional, but not everybody do that because they will only require your register, to be, valid when you have to sign something as responsible for the technical work. So normally all the managers and directors will have that in good standing, but some of the early stage geologists or engineers, they decide not to be registered until they reach these positions. And again, it's just an annual fee. It's a federal national program, so you have the regional councils, but they are all part of a national system. There is no examination, nothing. Just present your university certificate, and that's it.
Okay, perfect. And then just Zach there, if you've got any additional comments from the European side, and also as a person that works in multiple different jurisdictions at the same time.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, Europe tends to follow a lot of the North American reporting coding, as well as the Australian report coding. There are various other codes as well, so the Russian codes, etc. But there are many professional organizations in Europe. And for the most of them, the minimum requirement is a degree qualification. So straight out of university, I would say that most young geologists should interact with professionals in the industry. Most of the organizations require a referee, so you would need at least 2 professional geologists to recommend you for something like the Geological Society of London. And once you have those referees, you can become a member. There are various routes to different courses, libraries. There are many benefits of being a member. And then you would need a minimum of about 5 years of industry experience before you can actually start reporting to the markets of your exploration work or resources. And you would need at least 5 years experience in specific deposit types, so VMS or epithermals, etc.
Okay, perfect. I see we have some questions filtering in both on the Q&A and the chat on the side. So one thing I will address here is that many of these professional organizations, when you register, they have they may be called different things based on their location, but they have what's called the Geologist in Training Program. The Geologist in Training Program is very important. Most, from my experience working in Canada, most of the groups here encourage students to use their summer work experience to start. And what this does is it sets students before they obtain their, what we call our PGO in Canada. It's usually a 4-year process that allows students to start documenting some of their experience against their PGO down the road. So it's very important to start looking into that early in your career. It obviously will help speed up the process as you get further down the road. Okay, I think what I'd like to do here now is talk a little bit about the qualified person or the competent person versus the professional geoscientist. These are 2 very different titles that oftentimes get used one and the same, and really from someone working in the industry, what we know is that these are not the same title. Many people have both. Some people have one or the other. So Edson has volunteered to share some information with us today on the difference between a QP, a CP, and a professional geoscientist. Edson, could you please take it away here?
Yes, thank you. Sharing here. So, do you see this slide? Hello?
Not yet. No, I can hear you. Yeah,
No,
just
it's
hasn't loaded
black.
yet.
Yeah, it's black now. Let me try again. Can you see this light now? I have to stay in this. So do you read or not, the slide?
No, I can't. No, right now I can't see your slides. Sorry, just a few technical difficulties.
Yeah,
It would be a Zoom call without some.
yeah. You know, that's
There we go. Yeah, I can see it there now, Edson.
okay. So presentation mode. Oh, sorry, some technical difficulties here. So yeah, so the thing is how to understand the concept of a competent person. Some countries call that qualified professional, qualified person, and a professional geologist, right? So a professional geologist is something that you do by it's related to your labor law or your local regulation to exercise your profession. So you finish university, and then, as you could see in Brazil, it's not necessary at the beginning to be registered. In Canada, you have to do that. So we start as a geologist in training, and then a professional geologist. You do that at the beginning of your career. A competent person or qualified person is something that goes after that. So by definition, the critical template, a competent person is a minerals industry professional, normally a geologist or a mining engineer, but not necessarily. Could be any professional working in the mining industry. That has to be active, so exercising its professional activities, could work locally or internationally, so we can have a QP that's based in a different country. Has to be, and that's the part, to be a QP or a CP, you must be associated, registered, or recognized by a professional organization, right? And again, it varies from country to country. So if you want to do in your career, be recognized as a competent person, the first step in Canada, you must have a professional geologist registration. Okay, it's a really very important requirement. The second thing is that, as Zack mentioned, you must have minimum 5 years of relevant experience. And by relevant experience, we mean in a specific style of mineralization, specific type of deposit, or in a specific area, right? So if I have like 15 years of experience with iron ore, I'm not a CP for gold or copper. So it's very, very specific. So a competent person is kind of an expert, right? It's important to say that the professional organization must have a code of ethics, a disciplinary code, and a continuous professional development program. So it never ends. You are always learning. A competent person, okay, I'm a competent person, I can be a CP forever. Not really. If you don't keep doing, things and working and learning, so in some years, you might not be recognized by your peers as a competent person anymore. So what are the main responsibilities of a competent person? Well, preparing reports, normally public reports. So they are responsible in the companies for this communication with the investors or the shareholders, the society in general, right? So they have a very important role bringing reliability or trust to the industry. They have to be able to exercise judgment, and that's part of the experience. So it's not for, I'm a very good technical person. If I cannot, give my own judgment about something and put my own recommendation, signing off for this recommendation and, being accountable for those, then I'm not a CP, right? The principles that are key for a CP are transparency, materiality, and competence. So you have to be very transparent about everything you do and write. Only things that are material to the public have to be in your report. So if people go sometimes to very detailed reports, and the investors that are not very technical people necessarily, they will get lost. So only things that are material should be in the report. And the competence, so you have to exercise your experience in the areas that you have the experience, right? So again, if I'm an iron ore guy, I am not signing off for gold projects.
So Edson, just one question there, because it relates to what you were just discussing about the reporting. One of the questions that did come in over the Q&A is, for a QP, how do you reduce inherent conflict of interest when you're writing a report on a company that pays for that report? Something like an NA 43101.
That's very important. So we say that the CP has to be independent, but that does not mean that they cannot be an employee of the company. If there is any conflict of the interest, this should be in the report. So I'm a full-time employee of this company, but I'm exercising my own judgment. So there is no pressure to play with numbers or hide anything. So, and that's why you have to be a part of the CRISCO and the professional associations. So it's a self-regulated system. If you put something in the report, you become accountable for it. So you cannot say, oh, the company made me do that. No, you put that, it's your name, you are accountable, and you can be expelled from the association and from the CRISCO system if something was wrong or missing in your report. Okay. So it's really a question of accountability. Yeah. The minimum requirements to be a CP will vary from country to country. CRISCO has a general template saying minimum 5 years of experience, relevant experience. But the national reporting organizations that are responsible for the codes in their regions, they have specific rules. So you can see that in terms of total years of experience, so after finishing university and becoming economic geologist, there could be from 5 to 10 years total experience. The experience in the exact type of deposit or mineralization style could be 5 or 7, like in UNREC, like Zack said, like UNREC is the NRO for Turkey. And they decide that in their area, it's 7 years of experience. It's not only 5. And also in Brazil and America, United States of America, we have one thing additional, 3 years of experience in a position of responsibility. And why that? Because we have to test if the person has the ability to be, again, independent. Like when you're a manager or you're signing for something, you are making decisions and you are training this accountability. So we want to see that in a CP before we recognize a CP. The fourth main difference is areas of expertise. In some countries, we recognize, okay, you are a CP in exploration, you are a CP in research evaluation, mine design, geometallurgy, geotechnics, environment, social license, so specific areas of expertise. And we have that in Brazil, Chile, and United States, and in Turkey. All the other countries have just a generic system. So it's up to the QP to know, and he or she has to be prepared to face her peers. So if you can face your peer, you can have this discussion, say, you know what, I am a CP, so we are gonna trust you. But if you do anything wrong, then you have to be accountable for the consequences. Perfect. I think this will, in a short, summarize the difference between CPs, QPs. CPs and QPs are interchangeable. They are exactly the same, but professional geologists are more the beginning of the career, and CPs are mid to the end of the career. Okay,
I just at this point here, I'd like to open it up and just ask if any of our other panelists have any additional comments or suggestions around this QP versus PGO discussion. No, okay. Well, Edson, thank you very much.
So I think one of the key things there for many geos is to get in there early, and that's one of the key points. Get yourself registered with a professional organization at an early stage, and keep track of all your development work. If you get sent on a company course, or if you're responsible for training other geos, keep track of that stuff, because it's all valuable information to support yourself as a CP. So as a requirement by the Geological Society of London, I'm required to keep track of at least 90 hours of development each year. And only 30 hours of that development can come from industry, actual industry experience. So the other 60 hours I have to find from courses, presentations, conferences, and etc. So I think that's also a valid point. And mix with your peers, mix with other industry professionals, and teach each other. Learn from other people and let them teach you.
Yeah. That's the continuous professional development program that all the NROs have to promote.
Yeah,
really-
just in addition, the continuing career development is very much part of the SACNAS, or South African registration. I think it's only really been instituted as of recently, but you know, it covers you know, training as well as giving talks or giving talks or educational talks, as well as, you know, ongoing research and educating yourself. As you know, as geologists, you never stop learning. But I think in order to keep your professional registration and to continue acting as a competent person, you know, you have to be able to document that and be able to maintain your professional registration with whatever your authorization or whatever the regulating authority is.
And from continuing professional development to Lucy on the Canadian side, could you maybe just touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, it's very similar to what Mike had just mentioned there in terms of the new Professional Governance Acts and EGBC in particular. There is now a requirement, I think it's on a 3-year rolling average, for a minimum amount of continual professional development, and that is focused in several different key competencies, not just in geoscience. There's an ethical portion as well to keep up. And I think it's great for us as an industry. It forces us as individuals to focus on continual development. It forces companies as well to empower their employees to be continually development. And then as an industry, we're focused on quality as well.
Yeah, my experience with that is that all these programs that we have, they are really minimal, right? You want to say the minimum number of hours per category, they are really minimal. If you're an active professional, it would be very easy for you. It's just a discipline to register that.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. That's an important piece of it, right? Because once you have your professional geoscientist, it doesn't mean that you're done there. It's a continual improvement, and it's every year you're depending on your jurisdiction, you have to make sure that you're keeping in touch and submitting reports. So it's that way that the governing bodies are able to actually make sure that you're still a qualified or a competent person moving forward. Okay, no, that sounds good. So what I'd like to do here is just talk a little bit about transferring registration from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. We have a couple questions that have come in that are kind of centered around this. One is more a little Canadian specific, so that's something that transferring from province to province. The other is transferring from country to country. So if we could just take a little bit of time here just to discuss you know, the process of taking your professional registration from the country that you maybe initially registered in and moving to another country and getting registration there. What are some of the things that people need to be aware of?
Does any of the panel have experience in transferring professional accreditation from countries?
Yeah.
It's not a simple process, I would say. You know, some countries, quite the contrary, they make it very difficult. But basically, you have to validate your diploma university certificate to start. And then you have to go through, like in Canada, you have the examinations. So yeah, we have some examples in Vale, people that came from other countries to work in Canada, and they have to pass through the process. It's a very organized process, but it starts with the university validation certificate. And then you must do the same examination and things that the Canadians do. So there is not a shortcut. You have to start from zero.
Yeah, look, I'd like to comment. I've never relocated and had to reapply for re-registering my professional registration in another country. But being based here in South Africa, I need to be honest and say that over the last 20 years, 90% of my work has been outside of South Africa. It's mainly been in Africa, as well as in Brazil and Europe and a few other countries. And as a professional, as a competent person, a lot of the work that I've done, I've needed to rely on my professional registration. to substantiate my status as a competent person, apart outside of my relevant experience base. So, I do a lot of work for clients who are running projects in Africa that are Australian based. So, that's JORC 2012 aligned. And because SACNAS and also the Geological Society of South Africa are recognized professional organizations with the JORC code, I'm able to still continue doing my work registered with the South African professional organization, but I can sign off under the JORC 2012 code and accordingly with the NI 43 code as well. I'm not too sure on the other reporting codes that are out there. For example, the new Turkish one, the European PERC code, for example, some of the ones in China and Russia. I can't comment, and maybe Edson, you can maybe add some color to that.
Yeah, if you remember the table I showed with the different requirements, there is no direct, association between, oh, I'm a CP in this country, so I'm automatically recognized by the other country. It varies. Normally, the national reporting organizations, we have their own agreements. Could be like a general agreement, could be a very specific agreement, and they are normally conditional. So they are, if you are a CP in South Africa, you will be recognized as a CP in Brazil, provided that then you have to have minimum 10 years of experience, blah, 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 right? So you not necessarily have to be, registered in more than one country. In my case, for instance, I'm a QP in Canada, Australia, and Brazil, but I am registered in the different associations. So it's not because I'm in CBRR, which is Brazilian National Reporting Organization, that I'm recognized in Australia. It's because I'm also part of the ALSIN and the AIG, because we don't have an agreement between Brazil and Australia. And the other thing that's very important, people don't, the fact that you are a CP, even if you are recognized as a CP or QP, will not give you the rights to work in this country. It's just, okay, you can sign a report that will be submitted in the country. So like in the Toronto Stock Exchange or the New York Stock Exchange. So I can be based in Brazil, sign a report, and they will accept my report as a QP. But if I go to the United States and I try to be a professional geologist, I'm against the law, because then it's the labor law. It's not a question that is managed by CRISCO. So people have to be very careful with these things.
And Zack, just as someone with experience, recent experience with Europe and Turkey, any comments on that?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit less complicated here in Europe. I think it comes down to more who you're reporting for and where that company is reporting. So, most of what we report, yes, we work in many different jurisdictions, but we report everything to the AIM market here in the UK. And that is mainly covered by JORC 2012. And JORC is quite flexible in the sense that as long as you meet the minimum requirements and you have the expertise in the area that you are reporting on, then you are okay to do so. But I couldn't go and sign off on a 43101 report. I wouldn't be qualified enough to do that, even though I've got the minimum experience. I wouldn't be familiar with the coding requirements. And that's where here in Europe, you've got to be careful from company to company. So if a company decides to focus on a type of reporting, they need a geologist that is capable of signing off on that type of reporting.
Okay.
But most companies pick something like JORC. It's a very flexible code, and it allows you to operate in many different areas.
They all relate to the CRISCO template. So JORC is the Australasian National Reporting Organization, right? In Europe, we have PERC.
Yes,
Canada,
PERC is
TRM, yeah. But they all have their own codes that are based on the CRISCO international template.
Yeah, that's right. I should put a mention out there to PERC. It's relatively new to me myself. I've not been a competent person on PERC until more recently. But yes, that is another a body that is worth mentioning.
Yeah, and I'm seeing some things filter in here on the questions. So Kevin and so from Saskatchewan here, in Canada, we have examples of agreements where we have agreements with other countries to transfer into the because we're provincially regulated here, we can actually transfer quite easily province to province. We don't have to redo examinations and whatnot. You can, there's a process, but it's fairly easy to transfer within the country. Okay, so what I'd like to do here, we're about at the halfway point. So what I'd really like to do is kind of turn this back to that early career professional. So, you know, obviously it's important, but I want to know why it's important for ECPs to register for their professional membership, and what sort of suggestions you have for them on timelines and getting started on this process. So Lucy, maybe I'll go to you here first on this one.
Yeah, sure thing. I think let's start with the timeline. I think I'll echo what many of the panelists have already said today in terms of those that are at university. Entering into that GIT program is critical. And I think I'll rephrase it in terms of, you know, why you're not registering at this point. It's now a regulatory requirement. You know, we're not supposed to be employed as geologists without enrollment. So I think urging people to do this early, as Zach mentioned early, as well, document experience, you know, pad out your CV with what you've done and when you've done that as a record for yourself to make the process much easier when you do have to document that in detail. And I think as I mentioned in my example, coming from the UK with a UK-based education, there was a few more hoops to jump through in terms of EGBC process. And I'm regretful that I didn't start that process earlier in my career. I think, you know, trying to go back and find transcripts 10, 15 years later from university is not a joyful experience. So I want to urge everyone to avoid the same experience that I had to go through and start that early. And I think it'll be a much more pain-free process to go through as well.
Perfect. From Zach, from your perspective.
Oh, sorry, did you jump on me then?
Yeah, you're on mute there. Yeah, yeah. Yep. If you could, just give us you know, what you see the benefits for ECPs and why they need to undertake this registration.
Well, I think the key point there is being at the cutting edge of your specialty. So, you know, if you're working with a company and their focus is porphyry deposits, if you're the geo working on that deposit for 5 years, get something out of it. Register, become a CP, have 5 years of experience, and then say, hey, look, I'm clued up on this stuff. I've got 5 years of experience as a competent person working on porphyry systems, and you know, you can use that to your advantage. You know, moving on, selling on, advertising your stuff as a professional. But it's the key is the being at that cutting edge. So you're always one of the requirements is to keep yourself developing, and by pushing yourself to understand more all the time, to meet those requirements, you are learning, and there is so much more to learn every year in the industry. You know, I've met veterans, 40+ years in the industry, and I'm teaching them some stuff on software, and they're teaching me some stuff on mapping. It's a great environment, and it's what you're always learning.
That's great. Yes, Mike and Edson as some of our more experienced panel members here, but what's the value in registering early in your career?
Yeah, I think Zack nailed it. I've been in the industry 27 years. I never stopped learning, and that's why going out into the field is great, because it doesn't matter who's showing you something, you always learn something. You're always learning something new in our field. And I think as a graduate geologist, it depends what sort of deep end you get thrown into. I was thrown into an underground Witwatersrand gold mine as a graduate. So I think being a professional was a far-flung thought at the time. But having gone through that experience, then getting into exploration and realized what you could learn, and the ability to be able to register as a professional, I think is always there. And I think the sooner you can acquire the relevant experience, the better. And I think, I think you can register as a professional geologist in South Africa, but not be a competent person. You still have to, I would say, earn your stripes, so to speak, and touch your teeth on the commodity or style of deposit that you're working on. And I think only then you can say, yes, I'm a competent person and I can sign off on whatever. But as Edson rightly points out, you need to be able to stand in front of your peers and answer to anything that may come out of any report that you may have signed off on. So there's a lot of responsibility, I think, that goes with becoming a professional geologist. There's a lot of ethics involved. You have there's a code of conduct. I think all professional organizations have a code of conduct. So I don't think it's something that you must take lightly, but I think all geologists should become professionals. It's a professional degree, in my opinion. So I think we should make every effort to go through the necessary steps to register as a professional geologist. Yeah, that's my input.
Yeah, I agree with Mark. Even in countries where this is not mandatory at the beginning of their career, like Brazil, but I think it's about taking responsibility about your career, right? So you want to be a professional, so you are turning the page. You are moving from a university phase to a professional phase, and I think you have to face it, and you have to become accountable and shape your career. So being a professional, means be registered with a professional association that will give you some tools, some guidance, how to shape your career, including the code of ethics. The existence of a code of ethics, and you have, oh, you know what? I have to follow this. So that means I have to stop and think before I say or write things. So that's becoming responsible. And you have to train that from the very beginning of your career. So at the end of your career or at the middle of your career, you can be recognized as a QP or CP that has other advantages. We don't have that many CPs in the countries. You think, oh, how many you have? In Brazil, we have 100, more or less. In America, probably 400, QPs. We don't have the number in Australia or the UK because it's at professional association level. Chris could not consolidate the numbers. But the number of people that can sign reports as QPs or CPs is quite small. So to me, it's quite a good advantage in your career, because that means companies will be chasing you, So good opportunities will be available for people that can sign for these reports.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Edson. I think from my understanding, being a QP or a CP in particular may open different doors or more doors than not, especially as you progress on in your career. Perhaps opening up different opportunities that, those that are not designated as QPs may not get exposed to.
And if you take like 10 hours being a geologist without being registered, that will tell something about how you face your profession, right? How responsible and accountable you are, right? So it tells a story.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important piece that it's easy to get started. Like we can say from experience too, when you're starting out in your career, sometimes you have a little bit more time to take care of some of the pieces of the registration and the paperwork and the examinations and stuff than you do when you get 10, 15 years in. Time is of the essence at times, and if you haven't done your registration, it can be a little bit more taxing to get it done at that time. Okay, I would like to just kind of switch over to the Q&A here. So we've got a couple questions. So we've got about 10 o'clock my time. So we've got about half an hour left in the scheduled time. So I would like to just try to focus on some of the questions that have come in the Q&A. Some of the stuff we've already touched on, but there's some very specific things here. So the first one here, I'm going to turn this one to you, Edson, because it's focused on Latin American geologists. So The question is if there's any recommendation for Latin American geologists where there's no recognized associations that regulate their profession. So the example that they use here is a Mexican geologist that has to register in a country where their education may not be recognized. But what sort of advice would you have for ECPs in that position?
Again, I think we have to separate between the professional geologists and the QP, right? As a QP, doesn't matter if you have a national entity or not. You have to register your career, make sure and then you can apply to be recognized as a QP in any other country. There is a huge movement in the Latin American countries to join CRISCO. At the moment, we have Ecuador, Peru, and Mexico quite advanced. They'll probably join CRISCO next year and have a regional entity. But all the others, like Argentina or other countries, they are just observers. But again, you can work in Argentina and be a CP in Chile or Peru or Brazil. So you are not constrained by your country borders.
Okay, and just briefly here, Mike, maybe I'll pass this one to you. So we had a question about the QPs and CPs not being the same. The QP definition, is in NI 4301. It's not the same as CRISCO definition of CP. So can you just briefly touch on what causes that difference?
Again, that's the table I showed you, years of experience, position of responsibility. So in general, CPs and QPs are interchangeable. In CRISCO, we use both as the same thing, but the requirements will vary from country to country based on that table. If you go to the website for the NROs, and by NRO, I mean National Reporting Organization, JORC in Australasia, PERC in Europe, CIM in Canada, SME in the United States, and so on. Go to their website and see their own code, their own definition. They are based on the same CRISCO template with some small differences.
Okay.
I'd just like to add, I think, just like to add, I think there are a lot of reporting codes out there that are recognized by CRISCO, but I think the most commonly codes that are being used, certainly in our field of mineral exploration, is the JORC 2012 and the NI 43101, and I think to a much lesser extent the SAMREC code, which is used here in South Africa. And to be honest, there's not many SAMREC code compliant resources coming out of South Africa because there's not much exploration going on. But that's a different issue altogether. So I'm just saying, but so in terms of the NI 43, it's the qualified person or the QP, and in terms of the JORC or the SAMREC, it's the competent person. And I think both these three codes, the NI 43 and the JORC, are very similar in terms of the classification of the QP or the CP. And us, am I right there, Edson? Or
and the codes are very
they're very similar.
They are very similar, and the codes are very similar, right? In terms of you take table 1 or figure 1, you have the resource, reserves, and all the modifying factors. They are very similar. But what happens is that the NROs will update their codes in a frequent basis, like every 3 or 5 years. So it takes a while. Sometimes we have a new CRISCO template, like JORC, for instance. They are reviewing their code this year. There will be a JORC 2021, right? But CRISCO changed the template in 2020. Yes, the JORC will be 2022. So there is 1 year delay. So things can look a little bit different for a while, but in fact, they are all connected. So if you say JORC compliant, it will be probably CIM compliant. And now the American Stock Exchange, New York Stock Exchange, SEC, they also changed their requirements for a listed company that is following CRISCO in general. If you go to the SEC rules, the new rules, they say, okay, any CRISCO code, it doesn't have to be, CIM or JORC or SAMREC, it could be any of them.
Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna shift gears here a little bit for a different question. Lucy and Zack, I'd like to maybe get you guys to help me out with this one. So the question is around explaining the difference between a learned society, so something such as SEG, and a professional association, so like EGBC that you're referring to, Lucy. I think you're on mute there, Zach.
Yeah, I think something like being an SEG, I mean, you can register to be with the SEG while you're even still a student. So you're not quite a professional, qualified professional yet. Whereas something like the Geological Society of London, you know, one of the requirements is that you need to be a professional, but you also need to be refereed by 2 other industry professionals. And it's that additional criteria that sort of strengthens your stand in the industry. And obviously the disciplinary actions are different as well. So your reputation is on the line with something like a professional organization, which it might be slightly different with more of an academic-based organization. And that's kind of how I see it from my perception. Lucy, you maybe have some more detailed perception there.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I think you hit the nail on the head there pretty well. I think, you know, those 2 types of, specifically the SEG and the EGBC, are very different organizations in terms of what they do, in terms of regulation and information providing as well. You know, I think EGBC, the benefits there, I've always thought the benefits as primarily being for the public, you know, ensuring that the work that we do as geoscientists, engineers is to the right standards and that there is some recourse. I think, you know, if that work isn't performed in a satisfactory manner, and those could be safety, financial, or technical aspects. Whereas SEG, I agree, you know, you can join the SEG at any point in your career, and I think it's a great demonstration of wanting to learn about the industry and get exposure to colleagues around. We know that SEG is a global organization, and I think it's a great way to connect and network across the industry.
That's perfect. Thanks, guys. Yeah, so we have a couple of US-centric questions. Unfortunately, when we're looking at a global panel like this, we don't have any US representation. So I think for the US-centric questions, we've in the chat there, we've got some insights from Eric Weiland, who has experience with that. And I think what we'll do is look to have a US-specific panel here in the future here to cover that, because it's in itself is a fairly large organization. So yeah, so sorry, I'm just seeing a few more float in here, so I just want to make sure I'm catching everything here. So one of the questions here, this could be either for you, Edson, or Lucy, because it covers sort of South America and North America. So we have someone who would like to work in Peru for a Canadian junior company. Do they have to wait until next year to apply for CRISCO? So maybe just to touch on the point of where you need to be registered if your company works internationally.
Yeah, I think my understanding is you need to be registered in the country or province of where the head office is, or where the company is that you're doing the work. Maybe Edson can provide a little bit more color on that, but I would encourage them to, if they are in Canada in particular, to register with the governing body where they're located. And then there may be extra requirements for completing work and signing off on reports in the country where they're actually doing the work as well. I think Edson's going to jump here with a little bit more flavor.
Again, I think if we are talking about listed companies, it will depend where the company is listed, right? So you could be, working in Africa or Brazil. If the company is listed in Toronto, so you should be a QP that is recognized by TSX, right? So it's really what's the goal. I think in terms of professional geologists is where you start your career, because I think, again, it's something that you do from the very beginning. So you have to register to the local or regional council. For a QP, it depends on your goal. Right? Yeah, I want to work for companies listed in New York, listed in Toronto, listed in London. So that's the thing you have to take into consideration.
Okay, that's great. Well, it seems like we've gotten to most of the Q&A here, so I'm gonna just open it up here. Do you guys have any kind of last minute thoughts? Again, trying to really focus on the the benefits for the ECPs. Just any last minute thoughts to leave them with here on these topics.
I think maybe just reiterate what some of the key messages have been, that I've heard throughout the webinar so far have been, that focus on continual development as geoscientists. I think we're all hungry to learn, and we do that through continual development and professional development. And being registered as a professional geoscientist gives you that ability to do that in a kind of measured way, but also a direct way in terms of impact to your career. And focusing on that quality of the development as well.
And just to follow on that, I think it's also having the confidence to have people peer review your work. So, when you are responsible for your work, you have to let other people review it. And that really, when you have the confidence for other people to sort of pull your work apart to make sure it's of a suitable standard, that really does change your way of thinking, even when you're out in the field. So from a field perspective, collecting rock chip samples, you hammer in the procedures, and when you get to your reporting stages, you're doing everything like clockwork to meet the requirements.
Yeah, just to add to Zack and to Lucy, to Edson, I think getting your professional registration is vital. Especially, I'm a standalone consultant. I wouldn't be able to do any work if I wasn't a registered professional, and I maintained that registration on a yearly basis, which I need to do. I think it's been quite clear through all our discussions. It's like, once you've got your professional registration, it's not put your feet up and have a beer. You gotta continue learning, which I think is, in our field, we're quite fortunate, it's quite easy to do, and it's fun at the same time. And yeah, continue learning. And if you're early on in your career and you've achieved your professional registration, carry on, and then become a competent person, become really skilled in a certain commodity or a certain style of mineralization, and take it from there. And your peers will appreciate you for it. And you'll go out there and make more discoveries as a professional. So that's great.
And my comment is that become a CP or QP, it's the result of a career. It's more a consequence than a goal, right? So I think we should pay attention and dedicate time to learn, and really do things and get to know the details. So once you accumulate this experience, then you can feel like, okay, I can now, be a CP and sign off, because it comes with lots of responsibility and accountability, and you have to be prepared for that. So you cannot be naive, I have the title, now it could be very dangerous for your career if you're not really, qualified, because the system will allow you to do that at the beginning. So it's quite easy to get the title, but the problem is the trouble you can cause with that.
Yeah, and I think it's important, you might become a real expert on the sort of the theoretical parts of your deposit, or those certain aspects of it. But I think as important as having a solid understanding, and most important experience, is having experience on where that sample is taken and where that fits into the mineral resource estimate that you may be signing off one day as a competent person. And I think understanding and having some experience throughout that whole value chain is part of being a competent person, and understanding, because that's what a lot of competent persons sign off on a daily basis, is exploration results and ultimately mineral resource estimates. And that's what underpins what we're all trying to do, is to define an ore deposit at the end of the day.
I think there was a good comment in the Q&A here about, the QP or CP is legally accountable, right? It's not the company, it's the person. So you have to realize that before you present yourself, okay, I'm going to be, responsible for this project or report. Because if there is anything there that's not, 100% checked, again, not right necessarily because we have technical assumptions, but at least you have to demonstrate that you were, professional and you had the experience. So you sign off that there was no bad faith on that. So just be careful.
Perfect. Well, I wanted to first off just thank you guys for joining me today. I appreciate you taking the time here to give us your thoughts on this. It's lots of great information, lots of great questions from the participants. So I just want to thank you for joining us today. For those that are in the audience here, just get my screen back up. So just so everybody's aware, I'd like to just quickly go through some upcoming events here for the SCG. So as a follow-up to the SCG mentoring webinar that was presented in May, the ECP committee is hosting a similar event, but this time it'll be entirely in Spanish. We're particularly excited about this offering, as it will be the first time that the SCG has held an all Spanish-speaking webinar. So please join us here on November 4th and learn how mentoring opportunities can positively influence your career and what the SCG's program has to offer. And then the final installment of our Critical Minerals webinar series will be held on December 2nd. So the focus for this one will be on circular economy and what supply chains of the futures will look like. So please join us here again as we chat with our panelists about retrieving precious metals from electronic waste, lithium from spent battery cells, and using tailings to store carbon dioxide. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of the participants on the panel here. And we'd like to thank you for your time today, and please join us for our next event. Well, also, please take a minute to fill out the survey and provide your feedback on this event so that we can use that for future events.